Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Jim Below, your host. Very pleased to have joining me today Missy Stults, the Sustainability and Innovations Manager for Ann Arbor. Welcome to Conversations.
Thanks, Jim. I'm delighted to be here.
What does a Sustainability and Innovations Manager, at least for Ann Arbor, do?
You had to start with that one, right?
That's
You had
right,
to start big. Let's go for it. Yeah, so my job is to kind of do two broad things, I would say. One is internally to help make sure that Ann Arbor, all of our operations are as smart as possible and as sustainable as possible. So things like, how do we reduce our carbon footprint in terms of how we operate as a city? Or how do we make sure that we're using smart products when we purchase things, right? Reuse where we can. We've got an environmentally preferable purchasing policy. So how do we help identify what that means and how you do that? And then also, how do we prepare for climate change as a city? So that's part of it. And then I also do the same thing with the community. So how do I work with our businesses and our residents to help them in their lives advance sustainability principles? Yeah.
How did you end up in this position? What's your background that led you to a new position like this?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I started out as kind of a little kid who wanted to study whales. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, there are lots of us. Yeah, I love them. So I grew up in Indiana. I went to school to study marine biology. And there was a required course on environmental ethics, and it just happened to be that the topic at the time was climate change.
Right.
And I was hooked. So it impacted. I realized very quickly it impacted everything I cared about, from those silly whales to the people that I love. And so I did a little bit of an about face and was able to get into the very first program in the nation focused on climate change and society.
Where was that?
Columbia University. Okay. So I went to Columbia and I did my master's. And really what it taught, there were people from all over the world. It was a global program, so a lot of my colleagues were from international locations like Kenya. But what it taught me was to ask a so what question. So I learned the science of climate change. Yeah. But so what? So why does that matter for you in your life or for us in terms of our economy? And then that was it. So I worked for a little bit at the international level. It was super fascinating and very, very slow. Yeah. And then I had an opportunity to work in New York City with them a bit on some planning that they were doing, the precursor to the big, there's no reason you should know this, but New York City has a phenomenal plan around sustainability. And so
plans are one thing, the implementation is another.
We can talk about that too. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. New York gets a little bit of a gold star for some of the things they're doing. But anyway, so I kind of got into the local space in New York City and loved it and realized that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
Ann Arbor then is not a neighbor of New York, although we are internationally, but what brought you from New York City to a much smaller yet focused community like Ann Arbor?
Yeah. So I worked a little bit in New York, and then I went to a nonprofit that worked with cities all over the U.S. on climate and sustainability initiatives. And I eventually moved up the ranks to run our climate program for that nonprofit called ICLEI through the U.S. So I ran all climate mitigation programs, which just basically means how do we reduce our carbon emissions, and then adaptation programs. So how do we prepare for climate impacts? And in that, I worked with Ann Arbor. So Ann Arbor was one of the kind of leaders, vanguards in this work and in helping create this organization. And they were always a gold star we kind of pointed to, or a shining star, if you will, in the Midwest for a lot of the work that was happening. And then life sort of took place. I got an opportunity to come to Ann Arbor and work on a big national report called the National Climate Assessment because of the fact that I knew what a lot of cities were doing around the nation. And then I got a chance to do my PhD here. We came, and that was in 2012, and we loved it. We fell in love, had a daughter along the way, and decided this was the right place to stay and raise a family.
Right. So you have both the, educational background in, as you say, both the science but also the ethics of sustainability.
Mostly the societal impacts.
Okay, societal impacts. Yeah. Okay. And then, because of your work, you end up in Ann Arbor. Then last year or earlier in 2018, the administrator in Ann Arbor and the council, they created this new position. And as you say, you oversee both within the city as far as the government and the operations of the city, but also the community itself of how to deal with climate change and other things.
Yeah.
What kind of programs does the city have both implemented now, but also in the planning stage,
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really, really well timed. So just as a little bit of history for those who may not know, this office is brand new. So for a while, quite a long time, the city has had an environmental coordinator. His name is Matt Nod. He's exceptional. But it was kind of buried within the organization. And so this is a little bit of a daylighting and reorganization. So our office is brand new. We sit in the city administrator's office, which is pretty neat because I'm a direct report to Mr. Lazarus, which is actually really great. So what the kind of programs that we've had historically, so we've done work with our colleagues around water quality, around indoor air quality, kind of things that we care really deeply and passionately about. We coordinate with our stormwater team to make sure that we're retaining rain as it falls, precipitation as it falls on site. You may know we've had 44% more rain falling in extreme rainfall events.
Oh, okay.
That's 23 more Michigan stadiums full of water every year that fall on this city. That's a lot of water.
Compared to what, over the last 5, 10 years?
Over the last like 10, I think it's over the last 3 decades we've seen that increase, right? But that's a big deal, and our systems aren't designed to handle that, right? We put infrastructure in the ground decades previous, and it's supposed to be able to handle that. So we work a lot with our colleagues to sort of say they're all experts in what they do. How do we help them by bringing them the information they need around climate to make kind of climate smart decisions? Right. So those are some of the things that we have historically been doing. There hasn't been much funding to support a lot of this work, so they've been some pretty scrappy folks in the city. But we just created a work plan for the next 5 years that'll get us to council has set a goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions 25% by 2025. And so we've set a work to hit it.
Reducing it by 20 to 25%, is that the city as a whole? Is that the government, city hall's efforts to reduce what we, as you could say, the entity of the city of Ann Arbor, or what does that mean when you say reducing it by 25%?
Let's do it. So this table is a pie chart, we'll pretend. And if all of this table covers the community-wide emissions, so if we put a kind of bubble over Ann Arbor, all of the emissions inside that bubble, that's 100%.
Right, whether it's the households, the university,
that's right,
the city, government, whatever.
Yep, that's right. So we are talking about 1/4 of that pie. The entire community is what we're trying to aim for. We also have a goal of, by 2035, 100% of municipal emissions. So that's our slice, need to be powered by 100% clean and renewable. So our work plan outlines how are we going to hit that target, that 25% pie by 2025, while laying a foundation to get the rest ideally reduced.
And that's in some way or another working with who lives and operates and works and within the city. So you have interactions with the university, I would assume. What kind of not cooperation, but what kind of interaction right now is there between the city, between government and the U of M as far as addressing climate change and addressing these issues? Yeah,
so you may know, and apologies if you don't, that President Schlissel just formed a commission on announced he was forming a commission on climate neutrality to try to get the university to be kind of zero in terms of their greenhouse gas emissions. And Ann Arbor will be a partner and we'll have a seat at that table. And then we've also been in discussions for quite a while with them about how we can work collaboratively, everything from people commuting in, right, to go to the hospitals or to go to the university, or 55% of the housing in Ann Arbor is rentals, right? We have a lot of students and they're transient. And so we have to, I mean, if we're really serious about these goals, we have to be working in partnership with the university as well as our other businesses and our residents, for sure.
And so, as you say, 55% is rental, and convincing those who rent that they have a vested interest in what goes on in Ann Arbor, whether Ann Arbor is going to be their permanent home or not. That while they are here, there are benefits to having a reduced footprint, but also developing not skills, but developing the procedures that they as individuals can do to help reduce their impact.
Yeah, for sure. So in our work plan, one of the things that we have is we'd like to pilot, working with some of our landlords, a program to see if we can increase the efficiency of rental units, right? Because there's a disincentive here in that let's say you're my landlord, so you own the building, but I pay the utilities. So who's going to pay for all those upgrades? Is it you? But you don't get the return on investment, but is it me? Because I'm not staying. So we're trying to work with them to figure out a program where we can there's different mechanisms that we're looking at, but how do we actually tackle this nut, because it is pretty tricky. But we think we've got a good program. We've been identified by some national partners as being an ideal location because of two things. One, we have a lot of rentals, right? So we have a lot of stuff on the market. And then the second is we have a rental program already in place to ensure that rentals are safe. So we do inspections already, so that we're already touching all of these buildings. So there's some opportunities we're kind of working through. That's in our work plan.
Well, in looking at both rentals and single family or multiple family ownership, what are some basic things that a homeowner or I rent, that I can do, regardless of what my landlord does, that I can do to help reduce carbon footprint of my own?
Yeah, in your building in particular. So the very first thing, if you haven't done it, is you got to change your lights. I mean, you just have a very, very quick payback if you do that. So switching out, certainly most places don't actually sell the old incandescent light bulbs anymore. So that's good. I'm making it easy for you. But if you do happen to have those, CFLs and LEDs are even more efficient. So very first kind of easy step. And there are programs through our utilities to help
What's
get
the
those.
difference? You mentioned what, CFL and LED and
blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. What, you can say, what are the best and what do each of them do other than, as you say, replacing the old Detroit Edison iridescent light bulbs?
Yeah, so the best on the market right now are LED, light emitting diode lights that exist, and the other CFLs are compact fluorescent lighting. They are just much more efficient, upwards of, from if you consider your base to be that incandescent light bulb, let's just say it uses 100% of whatever energy, LED uses 90% less.
Okay.
Right, so that's really significant, and that just means you pay less because you're drawing less from the grid to actually power and to get really good light. So that's just kind of an easy step. The next thing is to caulk. I mean, we live in a cold climate, right? And so anything you can do to seal up around your windows, your door, to make sure you're not getting a draft in, that has actually a pretty significant payback, and caulk isn't quite that expensive in comparison to some of the other things. You can also put plastic sheeting over your windows. Those are some of the easier things.
That would be for the winter time, which we're
for sure. Yeah, in the summer,
yeah.
Open those windows, get a draft, feel good about it. And then there's phantom load, which is appliances are actually drawing from the grid when they're plugged in, even if you're not using them. So if you've got, let's say, an electric toothbrush, you don't need that charged every minute of every day, right? Because it holds a charge. Unplug it. Just by unplugging it and then putting in those little child safety locks, you're not then getting a draft, and you're not using, it's about 15% energy that device is using when plugged in. So you're just going to save yourself some money by doing some pretty simple things.
Well, we're going to take a short break and look at some of the things the city as a community can do, and ask our viewers to stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Proper sanitary sewer use by all residents is important for an efficient and functional system. Clogs and sewer overflows increase maintenance costs for everyone. Fortunately, most clogs and sewer overflows are preventable. Fats, oils, and greases can clog sewer pipes if poured down the drain. So don't just throw greasy pans in the sink, and don't pour your grease down the drain. To dispose of these properly, collect the grease in a container, let it solidify, then throw it in the trash. And be sure to wipe out greasy pans with a paper towel before washing it in the sink. Remember that your toilet is not a trash can, so don't flush things such as medications, cat litter, or sanitary products other than toilet paper. Together, we can keep our wastewater systems clean and efficient.
Hello and welcome back to Conversations. I'm speaking today with Missy Stults, the Sustainability Innovations Manager for Ann Arbor. Before the break, we talked about some simple things that a homeowner or a renter could do to help reduce not just their cost, but also reduce the impact they have on the environment and that. But looking now as City Hall or the city, what are some larger plans, programs, ideas that can be done to help the larger, you could say, community?
Well, sure, yeah. So picking up, kind of walking through, I'd say we're unequivocally focused on our own operations as well. We kind of have to walk the walk too. So everything I just said around efficiency, we need to be looking at all of our buildings and are doing that to figure out how to make them more efficient.
When you say, so that's replacing the light bulbs?
Sure, but that's also appliances. Okay. One of the programs that our city council is considering is a net zero energy affordable housing program.
Meaning?
So meaning you want to get, we've got affordable housing in our community, right? And we actually have a shortage of affordable housing, and we know that's true. So what can we do to get our affordable housing to be as efficient as possible, and then do renewable energy? So put some solar on top, and maybe if we can get there, put battery storage as well. And the whole point then is that footprint, so there's zero kind of emissions coming from it, but perhaps more importantly, there's no energy bill.
Right. Okay.
And when there's no energy bill, that's operational dollars that can be invested in more affordable housing in our community.
And reduces the cost to the people who are living in those units.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
and
makes
the
it
management.
more affordable then.
That's exactly right. And then perhaps that's just enough money in the pocket to help continue to kind of move up the economic system.
Right.
So that's really critical. And then the other thing, if we are able to get battery storage, it means during a disaster, they have power.
Right.
So they're fine if the grid goes down. So we're looking to do that. We're starting to explore doing a very similar thing with our emergency services, like our fire stations, so that in a disaster, they're fine and can operate. And right now they have backup generators for sure, so that they're okay. But how do we get them to net zero energy? So those are some of the programs. Before we started the show, we talked a bit about this grant program that our office administers. Right. And I hope that people take advantage of this.
And what is that program, and who's eligible to potentially apply for those grants?
Yeah, so it is called Sustaining Ann Arbor Together, S-A-2-T, and it is a approximately $10,000 grant that residents can apply for to do anything related to sustainability. Okay. So in their neighborhood, it could be maybe they want to do a program. We have, for example, one application in looking at curriculum, solar curriculum in schools. So how do students engage and maybe even put some solar on their own building? We have financed one that looked to increase composting in a certain neighborhood. It could be a nature-based playground. It could be block parties and increasing, social cohesion, because that matters. Knowing your neighbors actually really, really matters. So anything related to sustainability and in our sustainability framework, which is a plan we have as a city, is eligible. An idea just has to touch on that. And we'll work with anyone who's interested.
And those applications are available, online?
They are, yeah. And if anyone has trouble accessing them, they are welcome to come to me at any point and we'll get those materials.
And as you say, all you have to do, I won't say all you have to do, in some way, it relates back to sustainability.
Yep.
And it's, as you say, for a neighborhood or a program, it's not, I want to put solar panels on my house.
No, it's not. Okay. It's not for an individual. You do have to have some sort of collaboration as part of it, and there is a cost share. So you have to demonstrate a match that you're going to put money on the table. But that said, the matches have almost exclusively been time. So your time is valued in this program, and that's absolutely appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And pretty much anyone within the community? How about outsiders who want to develop something? They live outside Ann Arbor, but they work in the city, and they have an idea of how their workplace might be able to be improved as far as the impact.
Yeah, it is not what this particular grant is for. It's really for kind of the taxpayers of Ann Arbor. It's their money coming back to do whatever they think. But I would say if someone has some really good ideas, there might be other buckets of funding and other initiatives we can try to get some private capital to.
Okay, so you have an financial incentive for neighbors and others to get together to look at it. You have the city looking at themselves.
For sure.
And what else are you working on? What are some other larger, you could say, goals, let's say, that, to get to that 2025 reduction.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're talking about creating is some sort of one-stop shop for energy questions and assistance for our residents or our businesses. So if you had a question about, I really want to do solar, but I don't know how, who would you call? And so we're trying to figure out how we can work with community partners and set up an infrastructure to make it really easy to remove as many barriers as we can, and also the financing, because there's actually support out there. Most people just don't know about it. So how do we make it super easy? That's right, yeah. So that's one of the programs that we're working on right now. We also have some bigger items, there's something called a Grand Challenge that we'd like to launch, which is 5 years and 5 of the biggest sustainability issues facing our region. So this idea is to work with you, the county, businesses, our nonprofit partners, and have each of the 5 years focus on one issue. So hypothetically, maybe 2020 is the year of water, and all we focus on is water. And it's one message to the public around water conservation and water quality. And for a year, that's what we do, and we try to drive behavior change around water. And then we celebrate success, and we go to the year of food, and we start talking about food. So we're working on launching that. And then a green business challenge. So we don't have a lot of option to mandate certain activities. Like we can't mandate no plastic bags in the city, as you probably know. So how do we really recognize, yes, and encourage our businesses that are doing a great job to do a little bit more?
One issue that I honestly am not sure what the resolution was. It had to do with individuals who had put solar panels on their homes. That it was as if it was a disincentive, because then the value of their property would be reassessed and they'd be taxed at a higher rate, which would almost cancel the economic benefits of solar cells on their homes. I don't know if it was a lawsuit or just an appeal to the tax, what. Are you familiar with that whole issue, and where does that stand right now? Yeah,
it's a good question, and it's a little complicated. So it was state law that when you did this kind of improvement, you had to reassess. Ann Arbor, however, was one of the only places that actually did it. So where it stands is that the city still does it, but we have supported revoking the legislation at the state level to make it, just to not have it be done. And my understanding is it might be taken up in lame duck. So we are watching that very, very closely. Yeah.
And so, but technically right now, you do have, your home would be reassessed. And I assume that would also go for multiple family apartments. In other words, if if the landlord, the owner of a large, complex in Ann Arbor decided, I'm going to put solar panels on my 6 buildings that house 200 units, that then it would all be reassessed and they'd be taxed more.
I assume that's true. I've only really approached it from a single family kind of market. And I would say, we're getting solar on our home now that we've decided we're staying too. So we're going through this. And the way that it works is it's not the whole home, it's just the increment of the solar. So that's the assessed value. So you might put $20,000 on, you're talking about that, whatever that improvement is equivalent to, that's what's assessed. So it's not, we assess every year anyway in Ann Arbor. So I just wanted to push, because I know this is, for some people, it becomes a sticking block. I had to tackle this with my husband too.
Another issue is that Ann Arbor has, for a long period of time, had other areas of environmental, you could say, concern, whether it's the recycle effort, mass transit with AATA. To what extent does your office work with those other entities within the community, whether they be part of City Hall or, Ann Arbor Transportation is technically a separate entity?
Very closely, very closely. There is no way that we will hit our climate goals or our environmental goals if we're not working collaboratively. So earlier today was at a meeting talking about solid waste and kind of the future of recycling in Ann Arbor, and this idea of perhaps zero waste. I mean, how do we actually really get there? What does that look like? So that certainly is kind of something that we touch on. And then for transportation, the real answer is that transportation is about to be the largest source of emissions in our community. Right now it's still buildings, but not for long. And so
when you say buildings, what aspect are buildings giving off, the emissions that you can see and smell more with the transportation?
So the emissions from buildings are things like the electricity that's being generated, and our grid here is pretty dirty. We have, I think it's I'm going to get the number not 100% correct, but it's over 75% in coal. I mean, it's dirty.
yeah.
And so by default, when you turn on your lights here, you're just using dirty energy to do that. So we're working with DTE, of course, to try to push and change that grid to make it as clean as possible. But the grid is getting cleaner over time. And as that happens, it means buildings are getting cleaner, right? Or natural gas is cleaner than coal. And so the technologies are just changing. But cars, that internal combustion engine and that gasoline, we've got more and more people commuting into the city than we had before, right? So while public transit is wonderful, we need to expand it. We weren't successful, as you know, with regional rail. And that would have helped too. So we just have to be thinking about multimodal forms of transit and active transit. Otherwise, the single occupancy vehicle is just going to negate most of our other gains.
Well, in our last minute or so, looking 6 months to 12 months down the road, what would your goals be, let's say, over the next 6 months?
I'd really like to have a lot more conversations with people in the community about what they want to see kind of happen, what they want to be investing in. We're going to try to launch some coffee hours where we go to where people are, not ask them to come to City Hall and talk to us. So I hope to get that off the ground.
Now, have you been invited or been connected with any of the service groups in town? Things like Kiwanis and Rotary and those things.
No,
so
that would be great.
That outreach.
Yeah, I absolutely would welcome opportunity to engage with those. I have mostly been engaged with the traditional kind of environmental community, just because that's
public schools at all?
Working on it.
Okay.
We're working on it. And then I hope to actually have a plan for some pretty significant solar installation throughout the city, ready to run.
Does the city still have its energy fair? They used to have,
the Green Fair.
The Green Fair. Okay,
That's
still going on.
It's still going on. We'll see you all there. Hopefully we'll have some
And when is that? That's usually in the spring?
You got me. I knew you were going to. This is my gotcha question. It's in April.
Sometimes springish,
Fall. Please check the city's website for more details on that.
Great. And so I'm going to welcome you and thank you for joining us on Conversations, and welcome to the city officially, even though you've been connected with the city over the years.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we'll ask to have you back in 6 to 12 months to see an update on how things are going. And thank our viewers for joining us today, and look forward to your continued support here on Conversations.